Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud. Today we're going to be talking about the astrology of October 2025. We've got some grand air trines. We've got some grand water trines. We've got Venus moving into Libra, Neptune retrograding into Pisces, Mercury emerging from under the beams and going out of bounds. And we're going to talk about it all today. Hope that you're having a wonderful Friday afternoon out there. If you are joining me, please let me know that you're here. Put a little comment in the chat. Let me know where you're stopping in from. I would love to see where you're stopping in from and love to see you here in the chat today. Candy Corn, Corinne is stopping in. What's up, Corinne? Says hello, Spencer and friends from sunny Connecticut. Nice to see you, Corinne. Hope you're doing well. My friend, I know I owe you an email, so I will be in touch with you soon. Hope everything's going well over your way. We have a couple of announcements before we dive in, my friends. We're going to talk about the astrology of October 2025 today. But first, if you could go over to spencermichaud.com, I've got a couple things going on. And before I do that, Rachel Fletcher is stopping in from Roanoke, Virginia. How you doing, Rachel? Nice to see you today. You got sniped for the first comment today, Rachel, but I really appreciate your dedication and you being here today with us. All right, let's see. So, friends, go over to spencermichaud.com and if you could check out my 2025 offerings. I've got all sorts of ways to be of service to you. We are going to be looking at mythos readings, where if you need help with this, we're in the middle of eclipse season right now, so there's a lot of changes going on, a lot of stuff that we're trying to make sense of, both in the collective and in our personal lives. If you need some help and guidance, I would be happy to be of service to you. I really love connecting with you on a personal level. I'm a very detailed and thorough astrologer, but also one that's sensitive to some of the ups and downs and challenges and try to guide you through it with a kind and gentle hand. So go over to the Book Now button at spencermichaud.com and sign up for a reading if that resonates with you. Yeah, I hope to work with you in the future. I also have some offerings, friends. It is enrollment season, and Decan Walk 25-26 is going to be starting on Monday, October the 6th. And this is a journey that we go through with the 36 decans. We are going to be creating community through studying astrology and divination. We learn astrology, tarot, mythology, and we're going to do this through something called collaborative storytelling, where we meet twice a month for a few hours, witness each other's journey in a very supportive environment, look at each other's charts while we are sharing our stories, in addition to over 30 hours of pre-recorded webinar material on the decans, on the planets, on the tarot that you get when you sign up. It's going to help us find specificity through our diversity, see these symbols through multiple lenses and multiple lives, which is really cool. The biggest thing that I can say that this is amazing for is connecting astrology with your lived experience. I mean, this is an opportunity to do astrology in a very practical and supportive environment, where we're going to be trying to create a safe space to be able to just experience those twists and turns in the karmic or cosmic wheel of life. Sometimes we're on top and sometimes we're not. And we see all of that throughout an entire year together. We've got an amazing group. I've been doing this for 2 years in a row now. This will be year number 3. And we've got some people that are coming back for year 3. It's really a really great supportive group. You get 2 live monthly webinar sessions, a private members only Discord group, PDF workbooks associated with the decans, the suns moving through the decans, your perfected Time Lord moving through the decans, Decan flashcards, special downloads, and again, over 30 hours of pre-recorded Decanic webinars. So I hope that you'll sign up for that. It's going to begin on October 6th, first and third Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern for 12 months. We're going to go about 2 hours each class. And if you are wanting to know more, we recently had a very successful Decan open house, and we're going to do another one. So I would love for you to join me for a free Decan Walk open house on Monday, September 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern, the exact time that we're going to be meeting for our regular class. We had a great group that showed up. We looked at some charts. We talked about our philosophy with Decan Walk. We talked about what we might be learning throughout the course of the journey together. And we're going to do it again. So if you've been kind of like, oh, I'm interested, but I need to know more. And if you missed the last one, or if you came to the last one and I wasn't able to get to your chart during that last one, come again. I would love for you to sign up, come again, and we'll see if we can break some things down for you. Of course, there are payment plans available. When you sign up for the Decan Walk open house, you get a code for a free Decan webinar of your choice. Those webinars are about 3 hours each and about a $45 value. So I'll give you a little gift just for signing up. But I hope that we can work together in the future if it feels like it's right for you. All right, friends. I also have a guided group study. Return of the King book club is starting Monday, September the 22nd, which is Bilbo and Frodo's birthday in the Lord of the Rings book. I'm so excited. We've been going through The Hobbit. We've been going through the Fellowship of the Ring, the Two Towers, and now we're going to be starting the Return of the King with a very small but dedicated group of people. We've been looking at charts associated with the characters in the book, associated with the actors that portray the characters. We've been going on a deep dive into the lore of Lord of the Rings. Our good friend Rachel has been an amazing resource for that lore and her enthusiasm with this as well. So we're going to open this group up for the Return of the King, and then hopefully we're going to be going down the journey of the Silmarillion as well, Tolkien's legendarium of all things mythological related to Middle-earth. So that's going to start on Monday. Hope you will join us. It's been a lot of fun. Also, I have a beautiful partner, Tanya Andrews, who has a magical business called Third Coast Mojo. And in eclipse season, sometimes the energy is pretty challenging. But she has some amazing things that can help smooth your path. Right now, she has a supermoon box set to help you through a challenging time when in eclipses we have the sun or the moon being kind of swallowed up by a metaphorical or mythological dragon or demon, and that can be a little bit stressful when the sources of light kind of get swallowed up. But she's got this beautiful exalted moon in Taurus box set with all sorts of cool stuff. It's on sale right now. Please check it out. She's got some great stuff over there. You can also sign up for my newsletter where you can get updates on when I'm going live, when I'm going to be offering classes, and discounts on readings, classes, etc. So hopefully you're signed up on that. And finally, if you want to support the work I'm doing here today, you can buy me a coffee over at buymeacoffee.com and become a patron. This is the way that you can support the channel, help me keep the lights on here, help me get the library I need to do the research, to help keep you informed, to be able to afford all of the software that goes into producing basically this television show each week. You can also purchase a super chat today while I'm live on YouTube. Thank you so much for everyone who's been able to contribute. You're really keeping me going here, and I appreciate all of you. All right, announcements. We got through them. Rachel says, it's all good. Happy to share the crown. Good, you and Corinne sharing the crown today. I love it. I hope you're doing well, Rachel. It's been kind of a time, hasn't it, with all the experiences. We're going through what is called the Bardo period, which is a period in between eclipses. We had our full moon lunar eclipse a few weeks ago, and we are building up to a new moon solar eclipse in Virgo as I'm recording this. So there's some chapter turnings of the page that are happening right now. And we're going to see some of these things continue to unfold as we move into October. So as we discuss the astrology of October 2025, we are going to think about some big picture thoughts for this particular month ahead. We talked about earlier that we have a few grand trines that are happening. So this is interesting because we have a number of planets that are going to be making flowing aspects to one another. We've been in the middle of September dealing with these grand air trines that are going to continue into the beginning of the month and then start shifting over to water trines. So one of the things that we've been talking about over the past few weeks on the channel is once these planets all start moving into Libra, they're all going to make a trine to both Pluto and Uranus. And I've talked a lot about the first decan of Libra being associated with feelings of righteous indignation, where we might be feeling like something unfair is going on in the world and we want to right a perceived wrong. Well, we've seen that in the collective over the past few weeks. We've seen a lot of communication things where we've been experiencing the challenges of working through some very, very difficult social issues with one another, and how do we police our speech, etc. We've seen some very prominent comedians and figures being censored and losing their jobs because of things that they've said on their shows, with involvement from governmental censors as well, with pressure from governmental sources, which is a very scary thing, to be honest. And we've been kind of seeing how this is playing out in the collective. So really interesting to see how that story is going to continue to unfold. We will talk about that today. And then what emotions is this going to bring up when we start to go through our water trines? Mercury and Mars are going to be making water trines with Jupiter and Saturn and Neptune. So we will try to break that down as well, because right now we're in the intellectual phase of this. And then when we get to the emotional phase, it's going to be a very different type of experience. We also have Venus moving into Libra this month. That is pretty exciting if you are a Venusian native. If you have a lot of placements in Libra or Taurus, this can be a really positive twist of fate or fortune. Today, as I'm recording this, Venus is in its fall in Virgo, which is a challenging place for Venus. So if you experience towards the end of September some challenging things with creating harmony, with being able to come to consensus with people in your lives, when we move into October, some of those issues are probably going to start to improve when Venus moves into Libra. So we'll talk about that today, because Venus is going to complete its own grand air trine. So we had this kind of unfolding, the Mercury grand air trine, where we're asking a lot of questions. That's really where we're at as I'm recording this right now. We have Mercury in the grand air trine with Pluto and Uranus, like these exposure of corruption within our communication systems. And maybe these shocking kind of events that are creating a lot of discussion as to what types of ways we want to organize our society and how we can communicate with one another effectively. Then we're going to go through a solar grand air trine at the end of the month of September, and then we might see actions associated with that. And then finally, maybe we have a smoothing out of this process with Venus making that grand air trine in Libra. We also have Neptune retrograding back into Pisces, so Neptune's going to leave Aries for a short period of time and move into the water sign of Pisces and be part of that grand water trine that we're seeing moving forward. So we might start to glamorize a little bit of a different energy with Neptune, especially maybe sacrifice. We might be feeling extra emotional this month. It's kind of a watery, emotional month if you really look at all the water stuff that's happening. We also have Mercury emerging from under the sun's beams and going out of bounds at the very end of the month. So we're going to have some communications that are going to become more visible. We're going to have a moment of phasis, where we have Mercury that has recently gone through its cazimi, its renewal in the heart of the sun. And then all of the things, the seeds that were planted during that renewal, we might start to see displayed out in the collective. Now, Mercury out of bounds, there's some challenging things with Mercury out of bounds this month, because Mercury is going to move into its exile in Sagittarius and oppose Uranus and Gemini right as it's going out of bounds. So when we have some really fiery speech that is pretty unexpected towards the end of the month, we have to be careful of how to express ourselves so that we don't make declarative statements when we should be asking more questions. And then finally, we have a number of Pluto squares this month. We have a couple planets that are going to be squaring Pluto from Scorpio while Pluto is out of bounds. We've talked about this a little bit in past broadcasts, but an out of bounds Pluto is a Pluto that is trying to restore or change power dynamics. And with Pluto out of bounds in its southern declination, we may be seeing power returning to the people. So I think that's very fascinating. There is a book here called Persephone's Revolution by Rosie Finn. Here's Rosie Finn. And I just saw that this existed. I haven't watched it yet, and I really would like to spend the time to watch this. But Gray Crawford, another great traditional astrologer, had Rosie Finn, who was one of his astrology teachers, on his channel to talk about this book. And I'm really excited to sit down and kind of hear what Rosie has to say, so I recommend checking that out. Gray's an excellent astrologer himself, and it sounds like these ideas in Persephone's Revolution are really important moving forward, especially when we might be feeling a little bit of challenge with our hope, right, about empowerment in the face of rising authoritarianism. Okay, we have some lunations this month. Lunations are new and full moons, quarter moons, etc. We have a full moon on the 6th of October, right when Decan Walk starts. So if you want to walk into a full moon, it'll be a lot of fun. We're going to have a full moon at 14 degrees of Aries on October 6th. We're going to have a last quarter moon at 20 degrees of Cancer on the 13th of October. And then we have our new moon in Libra at 28 degrees of Libra. We will break all of these down as we get into the nitty gritty. And then we have, finally, we end the month with a first quarter moon at 6 degrees of Aquarius. So we start off with trying to balance out our contractual obligations to one another with our own personal belief system. We are then going to have some challenges potentially around finding balance and equilibrium and understanding what to do with excess versus scarcity. So we're going to have some themes of that this month of like, how do we increase our abundance without taking things away from people, right? How do we embrace expansion without other people suffering from that? That's a really important theme with Cancer 3. The new moon in Libra 3 is going to be talking about how do we create the right maintenance to increase that which is lacking and decrease that which is excessive, that being a decan associated with Nemesis, the goddess that restores right proportion. And then finally, that first quarter moon is going to be helping us to understand how we may feel out of place and exiled within the places that we live and some of the grief that may come up with that. This is going to be one where we're going to be processing some sadness, processing some grief, identifying things that are addictive, identifying desires that we have that are difficult to get met, and how do we do that maybe through walking away from something when it's untenable. So some interesting lunations happening here. A few ingresses this month. We have Mercury moving into Scorpio out of Libra on October the 6th, the day Decan Walk starts. So I'm assuming we're going to have maybe a spicy group, but one that will have penetrating insight with Mercury and Scorpio and the inception chart of the Decan Walk. We have Venus moving into Libra, as I was talking about, on the 13th of October. Neptune retrogrades into Pisces on the 22nd, right as the Sun is moving into Scorpio the same day. Then finally, we have Mercury moving into Sagittarius on the 29th of October, into its exile, into a place where we might be firing off opinions before we do the research. Solar phases. Solar phases is when a planet is either conjoining the Sun, like being renewed in the heart of the Sun, emerging from the beams, like as a moment of phasis, or when it stations retrograde or direct. And we have Mercury emerging as the evening star at 26 degrees of Libra on October the 4th. So if you've been waiting for messages to arrive, for a visible manifestation of the work that you've been doing behind the scenes, communication-wise, October the 4th is a great day for that. We have Pluto stationing direct on October the 13th at 1 degree of Aquarius. So a lot of the changes that we've been trying to make socially, a lot of the corruption that we've been experiencing socially, we might be starting to formulate a plan of how to deal with that. And again, I think Rosie Finn probably has some great ideas for that and Persephone's Revolution. And then finally, at the end of the month, the 21st of October, Mercury is going to enter its retrograde shadow. Now, this is a place where Mercury is going to be retrograding back to in November. And it's at 20 degrees of Scorpio, which is interesting to me because there's a lot of action around 20 degrees of Scorpio. We're going to have a Mercury-Mars conjunction around that place. Mercury is going to retrograde back to that place. For those of you who have been following along with the news, Jimmy Kimmel has a bunch of placements at 20 degrees Scorpio. So if you've been following all of that saga, this isn't really the end of that story. He also has a really, really powerful Venus, Mars, and Sun conjunction in early January that is right on his natal Mars. So I think that we're going to be seeing the seeds planted for probably a pushback on that situation. We also have out of bounds planets where we have the moon going out of bounds 3 times over the course of the month, and then Mercury going out of bounds at the very end of the month. Of course, we talked about Pluto being out of bounds. Out of bounds is basically when a planet is going outside the normal path of the Sun in relationship to the ecliptic. So it's going above or below this sort of imaginary line across the horizon. And what it means is that these planets are going to be acting a little bit like a maverick, contrary to their normal acceptable nature, contrary to their socially acceptable nature. So oftentimes when the moon goes out of bounds, we might be feeling extra emotional. Our bodies may be getting pushed to the limit. With Mercury out of bounds, we might be expressing ourselves and communicating in ways we normally might not. And with Pluto out of bounds, we're seeing consolidation of power, sometimes to authoritarian dictator types or back to the people through revolutions. The Pluto out of bounds began on August the 28th and goes all the way to the 21st of November. So the entire month of October is included in that. And that's going to be going in and out of bounds for the next 10 years or so. So a lot of this power back to the people type of movement, it's not going to happen overnight, but I do have faith that something like that is going to happen as we move forward, that that can help bring us hope in a time that can look pretty bleak every once in a while. The moon's going to be out of bounds to start the month on the 1st of October. It will then be out of bounds again from October 9th to the 14th, and then from the 23rd to the 29th. Mercury will be out of bounds from Halloween, the October 31st, all the way until November the 10th. So another time to really either think outside the box. That could be one manifestation of Mercury out of bounds, but also to really watch yourself in your communication so that you don't say something that could get you, I don't know. I don't know. Communication is fraught with peril these days. There's all sorts of different ways people are communicating or trying to censor each other. And that is a real big issue as we move forward. There might be some instances where people are tired of being censored around that period of time and are going to say what is really on their minds and in their hearts, so that after being repressed for a period of time. All right. That is our sort of medium range, big picture thoughts. We had big picture thoughts. We have a medium range view. Now we're going to start getting into this nitty gritty, but I'm going to check in on my chat here. Javiera is here. What's up, Javiera? Says, hey, everyone. Hope for the best for all. Sorry I missed the Decan Walk this past weekend. It's been rough. Oh, I believe it. It has been rough. There's been a lot of stuff going on in the collective, Javiera, and in our personal lives in between eclipses. The good news for you, there is another open house that is happening on the 29th of September at 2 p.m. Eastern time on Monday, the time we would normally meet for class. So if you want to come and join us and say hi or just get a free webinar, sign up for that. Rachel says, I went to visit some dear friends of mine who live in the D.C. area last weekend, worried about everyone as martial restrictions increase. A valid concern, Rachel. I watched a number of South Park episodes last night, getting caught up on all of that. And in one of the episodes, a character, Towley, visits Washington, D.C. and basically has to move through all of these military troops walking around, tanks, etc. And I'm sure that that's a reflection on how things are going over there with the sort of the basic institution of martial law in that area. So really concerning times for our basic constitutional freedoms, and I hope that everyone is staying safe out there. Javier says, great, I'm a Crimea ocean. Maybe, but maybe the tears will be healing in October. Maybe we need some catharsis. Maybe we need to cleanse and purify ourselves of some things that haven't been serving us for a long time. This is one of the things we'll talk about today, especially as planets start to move through the third decan of Scorpio when they're making those grand water trines. There will be a lot of forms that we need to let go of because they're not bringing us vitality anymore. And there could be some sorrow associated with that, but there also can be some liberation associated with it. So a real balance point with that. Javier says, I love Gray. I love how he says, oh yeah, Gray Crawford. Yeah, I love how he says Taurus. I don't remember his particular affect with that, but yeah, he's an excellent astrologer and a wonderful writer. Never heard someone say it like that. I can't replicate it. Well, I don't know if I remember it, so I'll have to trust you on that one. Javier says, oh, that's wonderful. I'm excited. During the week is better for me. My daughter will be in school. Good. Javier, sign up. There's a link in the description of this chat here where it's a direct link to sign up for the Decan Walk open house. If anybody is ready to sign up for the Decan Walk, feel free to find that on my website, the book now button on my website. But if you want to sign up for the open house first and just check it out without any pressure, It's in the chat here today. Yes, Javier, it says you're right, truly healing. Absolutely. All right, friends, let's start taking a look at the sun and its journey through Libra 1. So we start off the month with the sun moving through Libra 1 for like a day or two. And we won't spend a whole bunch of time on this, but because we talked about it in quite a bit of depth in the Astrology of September. So if you want to learn more about Libra 1, go look at the Astrology of September. We'll talk a little bit about Libra 1 in the Decan Walk open house if you want to join us for that, because the sun will be moving through that decan around that period of time. But as I was alluding to earlier, we had a bunch of grand air trines where we saw Mercury, or we are in the middle really of Mercury making the grand air trine to Uranus and Pluto in the last day or two. Okay. And we've seen emerging in the collective this idea of an imbalance, of something potentially unfair being handed out, or an injustice, right? Austin Cabot calls it a blindfold and a sword, related to the idea of Mott, where we're weighing the heart against the weight of a feather about what we're taking with us into the next cycle or into the underworld. This is the beginning of restoring peace, as the Book of Thoth calls this, the Lord of Peace restored. Now, it's challenging because sometimes when we have an imbalanced situation, we have to be aware of something that makes us angry, like the spirit in this deck and the Uranus can attest to, which were these monsters, or these, I don't know, deities, I guess you could say, that people prayed to get retribution for a crime that had been left unpunished. So we may be feeling some righteous anger, some righteous indignation about things that we view as unfair. And then we have to do the work of bringing them back into balance. So the beginning of the month, the end of September and the beginning of October is identifying where things are not fair, identifying where we have injustices, and then doing the hard work of bringing them back into equilibrium. All right. Javier says, thanks for doing another Spencer. It's my pleasure. We had a really good time. We had my daughter Sophie was there from Sag Moon Magic. Tanya was there. I think my daughter's going to come again. I believe my daughter of Sag Moon Magic might be participating in the Decan Walk. So if you're a fan of Sag Moon Magic and you want to connect more on that level, I think she's going to be going through the walk with us, which is pretty exciting. I get to pass on some wisdom to someone in my family as well, which is very exciting, and maybe connect with a family member on that regard. It's very Virgo 3 new moon solar eclipse, passing on that legacy to the next generation. Okay, so we really only have one day to look at the experiences for this particular decan, and I will show you this screen here. So here we have our, one moment, there we go. Let's see if we can make this bigger. Oh, well. Yeah, well, sorry for all of the technical things here. There's some new features on StreamYard, the program that I use to do all of this. And what we're looking at here is a Mercury-Jupiter square from the third 10-degree section of Libra to the third 10-degree section of Cancer. So what we have when we have Mercury hanging out in Libra 3, we'll talk about Libra 3 more in depth when we get to the sun moving through that decan. But what you can expect from the beginning of the month is a lot of discussion about how do we bring things back into equilibrium after we've gone through maybe intense negotiations. What needs to be adjusted after we have the discussions to say what types of laws do we want to live under as a society? What type of experiences do we want to have? What type of commitments do we want to make? And when we have that square to Jupiter, remember Jupiter in Cancer 3 makes us very aware of scarcity versus surplus. And let's say you have a malefic planet like Mars or Saturn. You may experience a lot of things in your life where you are either benefiting due to someone else's loss, or where you are experiencing loss due to someone else benefiting. It's sort of this like exchange of energy that sometimes can be very uneven. Now, we probably are going to be thinking about how to create abundance, Jupiter, in a way that doesn't take away from others, right? And this is something that's really near and dear to my heart because I have Mercury in this decan, and I'm constantly aware and asking questions of how can I move through this world in a way that's fair, in a way that isn't diminishing others. And it's a challenging question to ask and to work through because we live in a society that is not necessarily equal, not necessarily fair. There are, I guess, what you could call people that win and people who are on the other end of the stick of that. We see this in late stage capitalism, where a lot of the financial benefits of living in a Western capitalist civilization have come at the expense of different parts of the globe and different hemispheres. So we're really dealing with the repercussions of that, or we should if we haven't been thinking about it. And this Mercury Jupiter square could see us asking a lot of questions of how to right some of those imbalances, how to maybe what to do with a surplus if we have more than we need, what to do if we have lack and we need to increase that which is that we need for survival. So a lot of questions that may come up in the very beginning of the month. Now, the moon's going to be out of bounds to start the month for only a day or so, but it could be an emotional time, especially with that out of bounds moon hosting Jupiter. So we may have a lot of different ideas about how to bring things back into equilibrium and balance, and we may have a really important discussions around that. All right, so that's really our little peak of Libra 1 energy. Now, if we go back and we look at these Decan flashcards, we have Libra 2. So Libra 2 is associated with the Three of Swords. Now, this is a card that people get a little bit upset about when they see if they pull it, because it looks a little ominous. There's gray skies and rain and clouds, and there's these three swords piercing a heart. Book T and Book of Thoth call it the Lord of Sorrow. So there's some ominous things associated with this. It is a very Saturnian decan, and all for better or for worse. I think that Saturn is something that binds us to agreements. This is a decan that's associated with oaths and contracts. And back in ancient civilizations, not everybody knew how to read, so there weren't always written contracts. So a lot of themes of keeping your word are very important when we have planets moving through this area of the zodiac. We have a couple fixed stars, Vindamatrix and Algorab, that talk a little bit about some sorrow. Really, Vindamatrix referring to Ampelos, which was a youth that fell from a great grapevine, who was sort of a consort of Dionysus, and the grief that Dionysus felt losing a companion. We have Algorab, a fixed star associated with Corvus the Crow that was tasked with filling the sacred cup of Apollo and failed in that task because he got distracted by something shiny. So there is some distractions in this decan as well. We have a daimon in the 36th era of the zodiac called Kairos, the opportune moment. Although I will say, in his book 36 Faces, Austin Coppock talks about the spirit Horkos, which is the manifestation of an oath or an agreement. So we could think about it as potentially as Kairos, the opportune moment, but seeing it in the terms of Horkos, I think, can be even more enlightening. So we may be negotiating a lot of our viewpoint versus someone else's viewpoint during Libra 2. We've identified the imbalance. We're going through the process of creating a binding agreement with somebody. If you have a malefic planet moving through this decan, sometimes contracts can be broken, severed, separated, like a divorce. Okay, this is why we also call the Vindamatrix around 10 or 11 degrees of Libra the Widowmaker, right? So we can see things where we lose a spouse either through divorce or death, etc. Now, I wouldn't get too upset about that. Like we go through a period like this every single year. Sometimes people who have these fixed stars in their chart will experience the loss of a partner. I know my beautiful partner experienced the loss of someone that she was engaged to at one point in her life. He had a brain tumor, and it was really challenging experience. and she has the North Node really close to Vindematrix. So I've seen it happen in charts. I would also say that we could be creating positive agreements. So when Venus is moving through Libra, we might be seeing an opportunity to smooth out negotiations, right? We might be seeing a way to create a win-win situation for everyone. So not always as dire of circumstances that we might infer from the Three of Swords here in this decking. So let's take a look at some of the experiences we might have when the sun is moving through this decking. Javier says, no wonder I like this card. It's very Saturnian. Well, Saturn is exalted in Libra. So one of the things that we experience with Saturn is has been called a planet of nemesis. And nemesis was the goddess that restored right proportion. It gave us our due. So it gives us the results of our actions, for better or for worse. If we've been doing good work, we will reap the benefits from that. If we've been doing shoddy work, we will also reap the consequences of that. So consequences in this decan as well. But sometimes those consequences can be good if we've been doing the work diligently. Javier says this card is resonating big time. It's pretty amazing tool. Learning the decans and learning the imagery through the tarot and through all of the different lenses we can look through those decans, through the spirit, through the fixed stars, etc. And that's something we're going to be diving into in great depth in the year-long class that we're going to be starting in October. Rachel says, I've started associating Algorab with Jeremy the Crow from The Secret of Nim. That's perfect. That's perfect. We were also talking about Algorab in our Lord of the Rings book club, where Billy Boyd, the actor that plays Pippin, has Algorab on his ascendant at 13 degrees of Libra. And of course, in the book and in the film, he gets distracted by a shiny object, literally the Palantir, and almost jeopardizes the quest completely. But it turned out to be sort of a blessing in disguise, but probably not something that you want to engage with over and over again. You don't want to be holding on to that Palantir and giving Sauron all of the information that he's seeking for the ring, right? And Jeremy, the Crow in The Secret of Nim, a wonderful... for those of you who are unfamiliar, Secret of Nim, of course, it's based on the book Mrs. Frisbee and the Rats of Nim, an excellent book. And this was an animated film from the early to mid 80s, a Don Bluth production, if you remember that name. I believe he also did movies like All Dogs Go to Heaven, I think Oliver and Company, like films like that. Really great animation. And Jeremy is this just... wild crow that is constantly getting himself tangled in all these situations, but has a good heart, right? So I think that's a wonderful association with that, especially with the crow symbolism. Okay, so as we move forward into Libra 2, we start out the month, and I will bring the chart back to the stage. We start out this decan, I guess, not necessarily the month, but this decan, with Venus conjoining the South Node. So if we go forward here, and we're going to go to the 4th, you can see here that Venus is hanging out with the South Node. So what does that mean? Well, the South Node, also known as K2, is a place of decrease in traditional astrology. It is sort of the universal anus where things are flowing out of our lives. The North Node can be a place of increase. It can be a place of desire that is difficult to satiate. The South Node can be a very spiritual place because it forces us to let go of material form and maybe understand that we are more than just these corporeal bodies, right? These physical forms. So with Venus hanging out in the South Node, we may be experiencing a letting go process, especially associated with Venusian issues. It could be letting go of a relationship, letting go of a artistic project, could be letting go of a process, especially in Virgo. Virgo too, we may be letting go of a certain way that we do something and having to surrender to the universe, maybe having a slightly better plan. The moon's going to oppose Venus in the days leading up and after that. So we may have to say, you know what? I don't have to do this exactly the same way I've always done it. maybe to get to where I want to be, I need to just let go and let the divine, right? Rather than having to get so focused on all of the minute details, you may be letting go of some of those things. The other thing that I would recommend on this day is that I want you to look at the Taurus and the Libra area of your chart to see where you also may be experiencing a release, right? Maybe there's a service-orientated thing you can do with Venus conjunct the South Node too. Like if you have something that you're doing out in the world, maybe you're doing something that is a little bit more like charitable. So charitable acts can be associated with things like Venus and the South Node. So really interesting day to be able to see what we're experiencing here. And it's going to be also a day where the sun is hanging out on Vindamatrix that I was talking about with the loss of Ampelos, the companion, right? So those two things together speak to, you know, having to negotiate, having to maybe have some grief and let go of something, maybe even if it's just letting go of a process of what we were expecting. So let's move forward. I'm going to check in with our chat. Javier says, I like the K2 analogy. Yeah. So the story with that is, and this is important for the eclipses that we're going through. We're coming up this weekend before as I'm recording this, on a new moon solar eclipse with K2 involved. So we're starting the process of letting go. And we have Saturn opposed. And when all this stuff was going down this week, Mercury was opposing Saturn. So not really beautiful, but like really poignant symbolism of like a blockage of communication, right? Where we had Mercury opposing Saturn and then someone being muzzled and silenced. It's really fascinating. And here we just see Venus being in that same whirlpool or black hole, I guess. But what I've learned with South Node things is oftentimes we were ready to let go of something, and we exalt the North Node in things like evolutionary astrology. Like we have to move towards this. Now, I don't necessarily have anything against evolutionary astrology, but I do disagree with the idea that we need to move towards the North Node and move away from the South Node. I think that we need to find the balance point between the two, where we might be experiencing increase, but that might be an insatiable desire within our own charts and within the collective. If you have your North Node somewhere, like so let's say you have your North Node in, I don't know, in Pisces, like we see here, you may have an insatiable desire towards escapism, towards getting away from reality. And that may be really difficult. We may be experiencing this right now when our reality becomes so painful that we don't want to keep experiencing it over and over again. We might increase the things that we do to escape from it, which can lead to things like addiction. And that could be a real problem that we're experiencing. I think this month in general was really powerful for letting go of addictions and saying, hey, this might not be super healthy. We need to identify what was keeping us in bondage and then allow ourselves to feel the feelings associated with letting that go and then experiencing the liberation that comes afterwards. Okay, so that is the 4th. Another thing that's happening on that day is Mercury is emerging as the evening star. So you could see here that Mercury will be about 15 degrees separated from the sun at 26 degrees of Libra. And that is called a moment of phasis by Robert Schmidt, one of the original translators from Project Hindsight of ancient Greek texts associated with astrology. And a moment of phasis is an omen that speaks often louder than a normal omen. Okay, so when we have Mercury emerging from the beams, we often have really important messages that we're receiving in the collective, in the news, in our personal lives, etc. And they may be related to the seed that was planted when Mercury was Cazimi. So we recently had a Mercury Cazimi, the day of my open house, really, of the last Decan Walk, where we were planting the seed in the 3rd decan of Virgo of how we're going to pass on our legacy, how we're going to bring a completion to a physical process. And here we might see that the emergence of that on the 4th, right? Which is fascinating because if you connect the timeline, let's just use Decan Walk Open House as an example. I planted the seed with the first Decan Walk open house on the Mercury Cazimi. When we get to the 4th, as Mercury emerges as an evening star, this is 2 days before, this is the Saturday before we start on Monday the 6th. Oftentimes people tend to wait till the very last minute to sign up. So hopefully, fingers crossed in my case, people will sign up around this time when Mercury is emerging as the evening star. It'd be great if you signed up earlier, but but I would just love for you to be a part of it. But you could see how those two events in my own experience were connected. Doing the Decan Walk open house, hopefully potentially getting people in the door signed up and joining us on our journey. And then the open house leading to the beginning of class on the 6th. So that's one way you can see the connections of an event that you started. And you may have an example of this in your life where you planted a seed around last Saturday, and then something will emerge in the collective in regards to that. Corinne says, I feel like I need a social media detox with K2. Ooh, you and me both, Corinne. I think that as we see, I've been doing a lot of research because I want to be informed about what's going on in the collective right now, because it feels like we're experiencing matters of great consequence. We, of course, had the experiences of the week prior with an assassination of a figure that was very prominent in political circles. We had the fallout from all of that with social media. We had a late night comedian that sort of made a, in my opinion, which was a fairly innocuous joke, but more of a joke aimed towards the president. And that's pretty much what I think got him fired, not necessarily him commenting on that other previous event. And then we saw the FCC basically, because of a planned merger. This is interesting because there are bigger forces at play with all of this, rather than just a comedian saying something that someone didn't like. It was more so that we have a planned merger between two giant media companies that own ABC affiliates that needed to get approval from the FCC. Now, after one of that late night comedian, Kimmel, was talking about making fun of the president, which is, he's very sensitive. He doesn't like that. The FCC commissioner leaned on those companies and said, hey, I'm not going to approve your merger because this merger has to accompany a change in law, okay? A change in the law. Media companies can't own more than 39% of a certain area's affiliates. This merger would bump that up to 80%, a consolidation of media, and they would need a law to be changed by the FCC to make that go through. And instead of just approving that, they said, well, we don't like this guy. We need you to lean on him and to cancel him or his show, and then we will approve your business merger. And that's problematic. That is problematic because that is the state getting involved in censorship. And that is actually one of the tenets of fascism. So it's a really challenging time. And social media has all these different opinions about who said what and what we should be policing or not policing. Now, I think that being able to have discourse is important. Being able to have consequences for the things that we say is not unprecedented. Like an employer can fire you if you say something that they don't like. What is unprecedented is the government getting involved in firing somebody. That's where we have to really look at and be like, I would say probably people on both sides of the political aisle should be concerned about that, because that's the government getting involved in a firing, which is basically leading us to a state-sponsored media, which has been one of the tenets of National Socialism in the past, and that is a very concerning thing. We also are seeing just the monopolies of media companies where all of these companies are being bought up by oligarchs and billionaires, and that doesn't create the type of competition necessary to have a balanced viewpoint from multiple perspectives. Another concerning thing. So the social media detox with K2, I think you're right on with that, Corinne, because when you have media companies that are owned by giant conglomerations, it's very easy for them to spin something in one particular direction. And when that happens, it can just be like inevitably experiencing a lot of gaslighting. And I've noticed the gaslighting increase exponentially since we've started to see these large media mergers. I highly recommend a guy named Matt Stoller. I believe he wrote a book about media monopolies or monopolies in general. I subscribed to one of his newsletters, and he talked about the Telecommunications Act of 1996 that was passed while Bill Clinton was president that really accelerated these media monopolies. And doing your research on that, I think, is really important, because that is a problem for many people in the world, but Americans in particular, this course of history, this point in the course of history. Rachel says, I also like using the nodes as guidance on how energy is moving. During my last weekend trip, my trip last weekend, I ended up entertaining a lot of astro and tarot questions and having an output of shared wisdom. Mercury Kazemi in the south node in my third house. Ooh, I like that. That is cool, Rachel. Yeah. So being able to release it, right? You're not bringing it in, you're sharing it. Like, this could be another signification with the south node, sharing your wisdom, sharing your resources. You are being decreased, I guess, but sometimes when we share what we have, we're not decreasing ourselves, we're increasing our spiritual satisfaction. Maybe we're decreasing the thoughts that we're holding in our head or our physical resources, but think of the good feeling that you have when you give something away to somebody and you see the joy that that creates within them. That can be a south node experience too. So I really like that story, Rachel. Okay, so Mercury emerging as the evening star, an ability to restore right proportion and balance. And that is also going to lead us into Mercury moving into Scorpio on the 6th. So you could see here that around the 6th and the 7th, Mercury is going to be moving into Scorpio and becoming co-present with Mars in Scorpio. And this is somewhat of an improvement of the dignity of Mercury on some level, because it's going to be co-present with its host. Instead of being hosted by a fallen Venus that is in aversion to it, it's going to be hosted by Mars, where it is going to be in the house of Mars. So the tenor of our communication is going to shift. We may start to try to dig underneath the surface when Mercury is moving into Scorpio. We might not be satisfied with surface answers. We might want to uncover secrets. We might be feeling more emotional. We might be feeling more protective. And we might be identifying and asking questions of things that need to be let go of forms that aren't bringing us vitality anymore and need to be let go of and returned to the earth. Because Mars, through Scorpio, is severing and separating an essence from a physical body or form. And usually that physical body or form is one that isn't bringing us vitality or supporting the essence that it contains. And it doesn't have to be a physical thing either. This could be a belief system. Like, if your beliefs that you've had for your entire life are not necessarily supporting your lived experience, it's okay to let them go. When you let go of those old crystallized belief systems, you open the path for a new belief system to come in that support your actual lived experience. How many of us were sort of given a set of beliefs as we grew up, and then we experienced something completely different? And we learned that life wasn't like we were told it was supposed to be. And then we can't, if we continue to hang on to those old belief systems, we just can create suffering. But when we adjust and adapt to the world that we live in, that when we meet somebody that we were previously afraid of, like, this happens all the time. Like, I love the story of there was a man that started to engage. He was a jazz piano player. He was an African-American jazz piano player who would engage with Ku Klux Klan members. And they had these crystallized beliefs about him. And just through getting to know him, just through talking with him, their beliefs started to change and started to shatter. And he started bringing about peace in his experience, in his environment. So being able to let go of hateful ideology, being able to let go of thinking of the world in a certain way, could be part of the Mercury and Scorpio experience. Now, one of the things that we need to be aware of is that Mercury is going to be making a square to Pluto right as it ingresses. Now, this is going to be part of a full moon. So let's talk about these two things in congruence, in conjunction. This is This is the full moon in Libra 2. The sun is in Libra 2, excuse me. The moon is in Aries 2. And we also have Mercury making a square. Whoops, where is it? Let's get rid of that. Oh, I'm going to lose it. Command Z, there we go. We have Mercury making a square to Pluto. So now you can see it on the screen. So there's our full moon with Mercury making the square to Pluto. And the full moon in Aries on the 6th is one where we probably are trying to negotiate with others. We're trying to see things from other people's perspective, trying to bring balance and equilibrium. But we also need to express our own viewpoint. We need to advocate for our own side within that agreement as well. And this is conjoining a fixed star called Alpheretz. And Alpheretz is in the constellation Andromeda, which was the daughter of the king. Andromeda often gives us this kind of damsel in distress energy, but also can represent speed, freedom, independence. Like it accelerates and touches on our fight or flight response. It gives us an adrenaline rush. We have to be careful of taking risks that are inappropriate. But this is one where we're going to be really making some sort of royal decree about, hey, this is what we believe in. And how does that fit within our relationships? How do we balance that, that equilibrium between the two? Now, the moon is going to be hosted by Mars in the second 10-degree section of Scorpio, which often is associated with revisiting something from our past, sometimes with nostalgia, but to squeeze all the remaining essence out of it and then release it. Okay, so it might be a return to something, but it's not a permanent return. It's one so that we can learn something from it, distill all of our experiences, and then get rid of the husk of the grape, right? To distill it down to the wine and then let go of the refuse that comes from that. With the Pluto square with Mercury that happens, that's going to perfect the day after the full moon. I'll just leave the full moon up here because this is a time period between the 6th and the 7th. That period of time is one where we might be having some very difficult conversations, where we might be feeling and discussing that which we are attached to, that we need to let go of, but it might be painful to do so. There might be some grief around that. I think that we are going to see this start to play out in first with Mars. I don't think we've quite gotten there yet as I'm recording this, but I've been talking about the transitions from Libra to Scorpio. When all of these planets transition from Libra to Scorpio, we're going out of that grand air trine position and into a square with Pluto. When Mars was making its square to Pluto, which I think is still coming up. Let me look at the date on that. That's the 24th of September. I'm recording this on the 19th of September. So in about 5 days or so, Mars is going to square Pluto from Scorpio. My advice had been that there's going to be something that we are upset about, that's an injustice, that's unfair. And there may be protests that are going on. One great way to protest what is happening in the collective right now is to look up the companies that are owned by Sinclair and I believe Nexstar is the company, and start looking through their advertisers, the people that advertise with their stations, and calling those stations and telling them, hey, we're not going to buy your products if you keep supporting this type of action, this type of censorship, etc. That's kind of a way to push back on the system in the language that they understand, which is the language of money and greed. So I think that there is a danger, though, when the planets start moving into Scorpio, where we can be provoked towards a type of violence with Mars squaring Pluto that could lead to things getting out of hand and out of control. Now, with Mars Pluto, it could be like we're protesting somewhere and we're being provoked towards some kind of violent response, and that could lead to an even more authoritarian oppression. Now, with Mercury making that square to Pluto, We could be having a lot of negotiations, conversations, trying to restore right proportion, but our communication style could get very intense very quickly. We might say something, we might uncover a secret with Mercury squared Pluto retrograde from our communications that makes us very upset or brings an experience of grief. So be very careful about your communications around this full moon. Be careful about revealing something, and give yourself some time to process before you maybe share that with the world on some level. Oftentimes we feel like we need to go straight to a public forum to share something that we're processing. And it didn't used to be like this in history. Sometimes if we got challenging news, we could process this on our own, and then we would see somebody publicly and be able to share our thoughts. And I think if we slow down every once in a while and just start to think about and process our internal experience first, that can lead to some better outcomes externally. And we've seen this in the collective too. We have people that fire off instant reactions, and sometimes that leads to negative consequences. And I'm not saying those feelings are wrong. I'm just saying that maybe taking some time to center ourselves before we immediately react to something is a way to deal with some of these more challenging experiences. Javier says, "Ooh, I heard that story also, the one with the jazz pianist and the KKK. It's so inspiring." It is inspiring because it shows that people are willing to change. It shows that people that have lived their entire lives advocating for hate and spreading words of ignorance actually can be redeemed through love. And I think that to me is really beautiful. And through just getting to know one another through their experiences. So a belief can be completely shattered through an experience. And if you meet something like hate and rhetoric with love, understanding, and tolerance, that is what can break through that shield of ignorance and hate. If you meet it with more hate and more ignorance, it just fortifies that shield. It just makes it stronger. And this is one of the things I hope that we're learning from the experiences we're having, is when we meet these really challenging things with strong love, not weak love, strong love that still is capable of having boundaries. I think it can help dissolve even the most hardened belief systems and structures. Javier says nonviolent communication type thing. Absolutely. Yeah. Javier says, was there some transits like this, the Mars ones, last year? Last year we were experiencing the Mars retrograde in Cancer. So there was some really tough stuff going on just with Mars in general. We had Mars out of bounds at the end of last year, if I'm remembering correctly. And that means that there was just a lot of anger that was not necessarily being dealt with in a normally socially acceptable way. Rachel says, great advocacy suggestion. I'll have to shout out my neighbor, Camilla, for that one. I have this beautiful neighbor who is a Libra. And she suggested on one of her Instagram stories this process of being able to contact the affiliate stations that are associated with Nexstar and Sinclair and put pressure on their advertisers in particular, or tell them that, hey, we're not going to buy these products. We're going to boycott these products that you make money with advertising through. And that to me is a really strong boundary that you can set that doesn't necessarily create violence in the world. It creates a real message in a way that people can understand. Because here's the thing, the folks that are making these laws or that are exacting these types of laws would love nothing more than an excuse to create their own politically sanctioned violence. So you don't give them the opportunity to do so through those means. You do so through the language that they do understand that would truly hurt them is through their pocketbook, right? Is through a financial means. When you have people that are organizing the society through an attachment to greed, through an attachment to only respecting the almighty dollar, that's the language that you have to speak. That's the way that you can take back some of your power, because those folks need the collective and they need those resources. They want to exploit those people to make more money. And if we say, no, we're not going to give you any more money to fund these draconian measures, that to me is extremely powerful. Candy Corn says, I wonder if the Mercury-Pluto square will expose something hidden. I would almost guarantee it, Corinne. That is a perfect aspect for exposing something that had been invisible or underneath the surface. Pluto in myth is associated with invisibility, with things underneath the ground, things that we've repressed that come bubbling back up. In a combination with Scorpio Mercury, this is going to be something from the depths, from the tunnels. I know there's been a lot of talk about releasing files, that have implicated powerful people. This is the type of aspect that where some of that might potentially happen. I'm not necessarily predicting that because the powers that are trying to repress that are very powerful, but this is the type of thing that would reveal that type of corruption. Javier says, I'm trying to get this across to my daughter. She says she has haters at school. Oh, yeah. I think sometimes I feel you, and I've had similar conversations with my lovely daughter. Sometimes it's hard when we're young to not fight fire with fire, right? And because we feel angry, we feel emotional, we feel fired up, and we feel wronged, and feels like there's injustices. And but what I have learned from dealing with some very difficult people over the course of my life is when you try to meet them where they're at, all you're doing is just feeding that negative feedback loop into infinity. When you withdraw from that type of exchange, you starve that evil, right? You starve that cycle of hatred, of anger, of violence. And by starving it, it ends up starting to consume itself. And I think that's the best approach to this, is letting these powers of greed, of evil, of corruption start to consume themselves, and not putting yourself in harm's way in that regard. Rachel says, Valerie Kaur's work on revolutionary love reminds me of that great story of the jazz musician too. Her books could be a good fit for a future study group. Ooh, yeah. Send me some links on that, Rachel. I'll have to check that out. That sounds really, really cool. And I would love to do some book clubs like that. Javier says, no wonder I've got Mars, Venus, and Chiron in Cancer. It's a show. I'm assuming a shit show. Yeah. Last year was tough, Marshall-wise. And for all of the challenges that Mars and Scorpio can bring, a malefic that is very powerful can lead to some positive outcomes through severing things that we don't need anymore, right? So I think that a dignified malefic is a little bit more predictable than a fallen one like Mars. When a malefic planet like Mars, a planet of misfortune, is chaotic, that can feel really destabilizing. When it's predictable with Mars and Scorpio, at least, or consistent, it's much easier to formulate a plan to deal with those things. Javier says, there's definitely some feisty aspects this October, just in time for Halloween. Amen to that, friend. Corinne says, I'm hoping Mars and Scorpio will bring out some badass investigators. It is entirely possible. I think that is quite possible, especially with the grand water trines to Jupiter and Saturn, etc. There's going to be people that are going to be able to weave their way into the cracks like water permeates. And it's very hard to contain that force. And I think that, like you said, investigative, either reporting, etc., could be something that reveals the corruption to heal it. I mean, when corruption festers in the dark. When you're able to go into those dark places and shine a light on it and reveal it, that's the first step towards healing. I was thinking about the story of the Hydra with one of my teacher friends, an English teacher friend, my friend Mike. He was talking about severing one of the heads of the Hydra just sprouts 9 more. If you use force and violence to sever those heads, all you're doing is planting the seed for 9 more of those same types of things to pop up. When you cauterize that wound by holding it up to the light, holding it up to the truth, holding it up to the sun, that seals it so that things can't sprout in its place. So by shining light on things, by cauterizing our wounds, sometimes through love rather than through more violence, we are helping to seal the window that creates and perpetuates that violence, hate, etc. Javier says, in Catholic school, no less. Oh my goodness. Javier says, I will pass it along to our good timing of this kid show that's blowing up. K-pop Demon Hunter is pretty aligned with the astrology. You know, I'll have to check that out. People have been recommending that, and it seems to be part of the zeitgeist. I know Tanya wants to watch it, so maybe we'll have to watch it now. Javier says, I got Pluto and Scorpio. That generation loves to unearth things. Well, get ready. Buckle up, friends. Okay, so let's keep going. So when we get to the time period between the 8th and the 11th, so let's move forward to the 8th here. You can start to see Venus at about 24 degrees of Virgo, making a sextile to Jupiter at about 23, 24 degrees of Cancer, and then moving into and beginning to move into an opposition with Saturn. So it's almost like there's something good that comes through the sextile with Jupiter, or a positive aspect with Venus and Jupiter, but then it's moving into a blockage. So if you have something good that's coming into your life around this period of time, just be patient, because it's going to have to go through a reality check, right? It's going to have to go through a Saturnian process. Now, remember, this is an echo of the experience we just had this week as I'm recording this, around the 17th, 18th, and 19th of September, when Mercury was opposing Saturn. An example of this, we have a little building behind our house that has been sort of vacant for a long period of time. And many people have tried to revamp it, etc. In my very kind of selfish desire, I kind of don't want it to become a thing, because if, let's say, it becomes I don't know, a bad example is a liquor store. It has been a liquor store in the past. Sometimes that can lead to some experiences that are really difficult to live next to. You know, having addiction being in your backyard literally is a tough thing to experience. But there was a meeting about a new place that wants to open, and it's not a liquor store. It's like a woodworking thing. But it's probably going to be noisy with like saws and things like that. And I made a public comment at a city planning meeting, kind of saying, hey, this is literally right in our backyard. We share a property line with this. You know, there's not a lot of parking. Like, people are going to try to park in our parking driveway, etc. And could you consider just putting a residential place here instead of a place of business? And they basically were like, nope, like, we're going to approve this project. And it was very frustrating on a personal level, because one thing that I enjoy is peace and quiet, and it's hard to be surrounded with noise, and I'm a very sensitive person, highly sensitive person probably. And it was frustrating. It was a blockage, right? It was a communication where I said something and then I felt the denial of what I desired. Now, I tell you that story because there's an echo that is going to be coming with Venus here, and Venus is going to be at almost its maximum degree of fall. So there might be a similar experience where we want something or desire something very, very badly, especially with the sextile to Jupiter, but we've experienced a rebuff, especially in regards to our Taurus area of our chart and our Libra area of our chart. Yes, it's happening over the Virgo Pisces axes, but this is just a warning that there might be something that we're going through that feels like a blockage, where we are trying to create harmony, but we're just being rebuffed in some kind of way. And the themes associated with those two decans that Venus is in, with Virgo 3, passing on a legacy, bringing something into completion materially, letting go of a form that is falling into decay and entropy. Saturn in Pisces 3 is talking about the sacrifices necessary to enact our vision and our dream, maybe even getting a reality check about our dreams. That's difficult. Like, if I just use my own experience again, the dream I have of a quiet, peaceful, pastoral existence is sometimes challenged in the place that I live. I live at a crossroads. I live at a stoplight, basically, with a lot of things going on around me. And one of the things I've had to learn, and that will probably be another lesson moving forward, especially with this chart, you could see this opposition between Venus and Saturn. Also, the moon is going to be T-squaring this. Okay, so there might be the added bonus of needing to let go of one particular option to be able to move forward, because that decan is associated with one twin needing to sacrifice part of their immortality to let the other twin live, the story of Castor and Pollux. In my own experience, when I've experienced this disappointment, when I've experienced this disconnect between my vision, my ideal, and the reality of it, I've had to learn that external circumstances aren't the only way to create peace of mind. We can try and try and try to make our external circumstances as perfect as we desire in our dreams. But the reality of our lives does not always match up with that. And how do we become centered, peaceful, balanced internally so that instead of bringing anxiety to that situation and hence sometimes making it worse, we bring peacefulness and clarity to that situation, or balance or composure? Now, in hindsight, maybe after voicing my opinion on the city planning, maybe making an attempt to get to know the people that are putting the business in and trying to make a solution that is amenable to both parties might be the way to center and compose myself and then create a win-win situation, rather than coming at it from a place of already being tight, already being angry. That's an example of how the work that someone like your friendly neighborhood astrologer is going to have to do in between that disappointment and the reality of the situation and coming to terms with it, right? Because the vision isn't matching necessarily up with the reality. And how do we come to terms with it? Through coming into a balanced, peaceful place in our own inner experience first. So when you're experiencing these oppositions with Venus and Saturn, with Mercury and Saturn this week, you can create a better outcome by not just accepting your disappointment, but I think coming to terms with the disappointment and then figuring out what your next steps are, rather than adding to things through a negative perspective, attitude, etc. moving forward. Javier says, oh yes, says, I love the Hydra analogy. It's a good one, right? I mean, myth can teach us so many things. That's why I love studying classical mythologies from so many different cultures, because myth and story are the ways that we learn how to deal with some of the human experiences that people have been going through cyclically for millions of years, thousands of years, millions of years, etc. So those stories are really powerful because we're not the first generation to experience disappointment. We're not the first generation to experience corruption that needs to be cauterized. These are things that have been happening to generations and generations. Javier says, you need peace at home. I do need peace at home, but I need peace in my heart first. And maybe peace in my heart will lead to peace in my home. I'll tell you what, it worked with my neighbors. I was having a similar experience with some neighbors that were kind of noisy, a little bit inconsiderate sometimes. And there have been times in the past where I met that noise and inconsiderateness with anger. And it made it worse. It led to some severing of some relationships that were very painful for both parties. And as I reflected on that, I said, well, how do I approach these situations that will inevitably come again from a different way, from maybe of trying to find peace with those folks? And it has actually led to some better outcomes. I have a neighbor that has some very loud vehicles and loves pyrotechnics. We'll just put it that way. And I have had some really nice conversations with them and approached them with love and care, but also asking for reciprocity, but not in a way that demands it, in a way that is making a plea to our common humanity and our shared goals of living in peace with one another. And it's gone a lot better when I've taken that approach, rather than coming out with my metaphorical horns up, and ready to charge. All right. Javier says, be right back. I got to go get my little one. Oh, man, you're pulling double duty today, Javier. Okay. So let's move forward. So that's our echo with Venus opposing Saturn. just like we are experienced with Mercury this week as I'm recording this. And that brings us to the sun moving into Libra 3. Before I move into that experience here, let's just take a little bit of a stretch. I turned off the camera following thing because it was messing some things up. But do me a favor, friends. Take a stretch, all right? Get a drink of water. Shake some things out. While you're doing that, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you're new. Get something, get a snack. Go talk to the little ones if you've got little ones that you need to attend to. Go over, if you can, go over to the Decan Walk open house link. Sign up for that. You know, super easy, free. You just have to fill out very minimal things, and then you get a free code for a free webinar, and then you can come hang out with us. And it's fairly informal. We're going to just talk about what Decan Walk's all about, talk about some of our values in what we do, and you can see if it's a fit for you, if it's a fit for you being a part of the group. And then we're going to read some charts. We're going to just show you what we do in class. The way class is structured with that is I have pre-recorded webinars that you can watch before class, and no pressure to engage with that material. You're still going to get a lot out of it just from looking at people's charts while they're telling their stories and their experiences. And while they're doing that, every few minutes I will stop and teach the technique of what is happening in their life and connect it with their charts and through the language of the decans like we do here on the channel. I think it's an extraordinarily powerful technique for learning experiential astrology. It's something where we ground this knowledge in our everyday lives. It's so easy to get lost in our head, to get lost in the theory, to get lost in all of that when we're doing something like this that's so powerful. But when we can start seeing the world through the lens of astrology, through the lens of the tarot, and in real time, to be able to get the aha moments of like, oh, wait a minute, Mars is squaring Pluto right now. That means that there is an increased possibility for things to get out of hand if I get angry. In that moment, you can make a different choice in that moment. And we can anticipate these things through our classes. We can prepare ourselves mentally for the energies that want to work through us and choose through our pronoia. Pronoia is a fancy word for divine providence, for grace, for foresight, right? Through our foresight, we can choose a better response and a better outcome, just understanding the themes that are being asked of us in that moment. When we go through life with a non-K, with ignorance, sometimes we play out the archetypal stories in our charts and the connections in our chart. The only way to become truly liberated from those elements is to understand them. And sometimes there's things that we can't avoid. There's going to be things in our life that we can't avoid. But we can make better choices in the moment that can lead to either better understanding and clarity or better outcomes physically. And how many of you have reacted negatively to something that created more stress and tension internally in your experience? Whereas if you let yourself go relax and you met the challenge with a relaxed energy, aura, body, etc., that can reduce the damage that can happen when you're experiencing something negative. Think of a car accident or like falling off a horse. They tell you go limp or like don't tense up, you know, because if you let your body go loose, if you can anticipate it in a way that doesn't make you tense up, you can make better choices in the moment. So I hope that you'll join me for that. Let's go to Libra 3. Libra 3. It's about balance and intimacy. Let's bring up Libra again here. So here is Libra 3. This is our Decan flashcard for Libra 3. This is a Jupiter-ruled Decan or face in Libra. And Book T calls it the Lord of Rest from Strife. Book of Thoth calls it the Lord of Truce. Austin Kappa calls it a gyroscope, which is really interesting because it's like a number of different little balances happening where we are trying to maintain our equilibrium. We talked about the daimon nemesis, who is a goddess that gives you your due. She increases that which is lacking, decreases that which is excessive. She restores right proportion to the randomness of 2K. 2K translates to chance. So if there's things that have been distributed unequally through no fault of your own, which happens all the time, Nemesis, and hence Libra 3, can be a period of time and a deity that you can work with to start restoring balance. This is another insight I've had about the 12th house being the joy of Saturn. As a 12th house sun and Mercury myself, I've experienced the extremes that go along with those two planets. I've had mental fixations with Mercury. I've had periods of great arrogance and great lack of confidence, extremes of the solar energy. And I've had to learn to come to balance and equilibrium through reducing some of that excess and reducing arrogance, increasing confidence, and finding that perfect equilibrium and balance. Communication-wise with Mercury, putting just enough thought and attention to the details without overthinking things. Those are the types of restorative actions of not only Nemesis, but the 12th house being the joy of Saturn. So if you have some 12th house placements, you could be restoring some of your planetary energy from maybe lifetimes past as well. So when the sun's moving through this decan, from 20 degrees of Libra to 29 degrees and 59 minutes of Libra before it clicks over into Scorpio, it's okay to rest. It's okay to try to find the right maintenance mode in your life. I will say that as a native that has the part of spirit, a really important point in Hellenistic astrology that sometimes speaks to how you meet your fated moments. Whenever there's something that happens to me that's really important, that's kind of stressful, my immediate reaction after I've had the initial shock is to get real still, is to go into this meditative pose that you see here. And I think that what that can do, like I've been preaching on the channel, is that can help to bring clarity through settling the chaotic movement. Let's say you have, again, the metaphor of a jar of water that has some dirt in it. You keep shaking it up with your anxiety. Let's say that that's your brain. It's water filled with dirt. You keep shaking it with anxiety. You keep getting angrier and angrier, or more worried or more fearful. There isn't going to be clarity. You're not going to be able to see clearly the steps that you're going to need to take. So the real enterprise with this is being able to get still, to be able to let those thoughts, to let those feelings settle, so that you know with clarity the most balanced action to take moving forward that will lead to the most positive outcomes, hopefully. There's some really positive fixed stars in this decan, Spica being one of the best ones in the zodiac that leads to feelings of gifts, results that are joyful from past actions. Arcturus is kind of a trailblazer. It represents the transition from a hunter-gatherer society to an agricultural society. Now we can debate the merits of that, but it talks about civility. So restoration of civility with Arcturus on some level, but also with some pioneering spirit. So these are some of the things we might be looking at through this particular experience of Libra 3. Now, when we go back to the chart, we're going to start Libra 3 with a last quarter moon. So if we go forward to the 13th, now we will see the moon. Whoops, let's make them red. Here's I want a circle. Give me the circle. The circle of life. There we go. All right, so this is the last quarter moon in Cancer 3 and squaring the Libra moon on the 13th. The 13th is actually a very busy day. This is not the only thing that's going on, but let's start here to set the scene. So again, we are trying to restore balance and equilibrium, but with the moon moving through Cancer 3, we may be having an awareness of where we have an excess, where we have abundance, We also may have an awareness of where we have a lack, where we have a scarcity. And through this quarter moon square, we may be trying to restore the right balance between those two, and maybe do things in a way, since the moon is hanging out with Jupiter, to be able to bring that balance without hurting others. This is, I think, one of the great gifts of Jupiter in Cancer 3, is being able to benefit yourself and others through things like philanthropy, or increase your good fortune without having it take away and detract from someone else's experience. And that's really powerful. That is an extremely powerful thing to be able to do out in the world. The kind of the believe that there's a spiritual axiom of do no harm. And this, I think, is one of those moments where we might be thinking about, how do we do less harm in the world to others? How do we create abundance in our lives and share that abundance with others rather than doing it at someone else's expense? The other experience we may be having on that day is Venus moving into Libra and then immediately opposing Neptune. Meanwhile, Pluto is stationing direct. So here is Venus moving into Libra, opposing Neptune, and Pluto, make Pluto purple. How about that? Here's Pluto stationing direct. Okay. There it is, stationing direct. So how do we incorporate that in with the last quarter moon? Because we want to look for connections. We want to look at this as a tapestry, not just as these individual things. So when you are trying to balance out, creating equilibrium, harmony in your life, increasing that which is excessive, decreasing that which is lacking, or I probably said that opposite, increasing the lack, decreasing the excess. You'll have to think about your own needs versus other people's needs, with Venus making an opposition to Neptune. That could be a little bit challenging. There could be some things that you're trying to create win-win situations, but you're identifying something that is, or attempting to smooth out something that is unfair. Now remember, this is an echo of the grand trine that we are experiencing right in this moment as I'm recording this on the 19th. And this is the grand air trine of Venus, not Mercury or the Sun, which come beforehand. So things often come in threes, right? We're asking the questions, we're discussing the injustice. When we see the Sun moving into the grand air trine, there might be actions that are taken to right the wrong. When Venus is here, this is going to be we might be starting to see the results of this, starting to smooth over and restore some of the right proportion, restore some of the balances that have gotten off kilter. So the Venus, Uranus, and Pluto are all going to be making that grand air trine right when we're having this Pluto stationing direct as well. So Pluto stationing direct means that maybe we're able to make some changes in the collective. Maybe we're able to change some laws. I wanted to call you back to the live stream I did on Pluto and Aquarius. And in that, I talked a lot about, this was many months ago. In it, I talked about Aquarius and a concept I learned from A Tiny Universe by Joy Usher, an excellent traditional astrologer from Australia. And she talks about Aquarius and Saturn in particular, Saturn's action in Aquarius, as one of sort of a glass ceiling kind of energy, where instead of making physical boundaries around something, they make these idealistic boundaries. She talks about Aquarius as a sign that loves to only make visible one particular narrative and repress and cast into darkness all other narratives. And that's exactly what we've been seeing with these grand air trines here, is one particular viewpoint being cast into darkness. Shocking events happening with Uranus in Gemini. If you look at the symbolism of the card associated with Gemini, it shows a figure that's blindfolded and bound. So think about that in regards to censorship. And then we have another blindfolded figure in the Two of Swords associated with Venus here. So we have two blindfolded figures. One of them is bound. One of them is holding their own swords. And then in the Five of Swords associated with Pluto, We have a figure that is walking off in defeat. It's called conflict and defeat. We have a smug victor, and we have someone walking off in defeat. So the themes, the visual themes with this are just so literal and poignant. You know, like we've had these conflicts, we've had a victor, we've had someone who's gone off into exile and defeat. We've had these shocks of communication that have led to feelings of being bound, of what we can and cannot say. We have this feeling of righteous indignation of things that may not be fair. We've got this anger that's boiling up when we see these injustices and we see these imbalances out in the collective. So between the 13th and the 14th, you know, you're going to have that opposition to Neptune where there might be some confusion about what is fair and what isn't, but we have it echoing that those much greater, larger scale issues. When I first talked about the grand air trines, I talked about them as collective issues, not just personal issues. Because when we have the transcendental planets like Uranus and Pluto involved, these are energies that are bigger than the individual. So, for example, Jimmy Kimmel is a vehicle and a vessel for this greater concept that we're wrestling with as a collective. Same with Charlie Kirk. They are symbols of something. They are symbols of something that we are wrestling with as an idealistic community. And it has an effect on not just individuals, not just those individuals, although they were affected in negative ways, but they are symbols of something greater that is going to be playing out over the next months and years. And that doesn't always happen. Sometimes there's events that are triggers for reflections on what it means to be human, what it means to be in a civil society, what it means to exchange information with one another, what it means to craft the ideals and laws that we hopefully can live in harmony with one another within. So it's just really fascinating to see how that has played out. Okay, if we move forward to the 17th, we see the Sun making a square to Jupiter. And between the grand air trine and this Sun's Jupiter square, we're going to be building to this. So astrological aspects don't just happen like the day of. You know, we have, especially when we have these planets that move like a little bit slower, there's going to be this build-up period. So this build-up period between the 14th and the 17th is leading to this Jupiter Sun square. Okay. Again, an echo of what we were experiencing at that quarter moon, right? Where we are seeing now not just the moon making that square to the sun, but Jupiter making that square. So we might be able to take actions on those reflections that we were making. We might be able to restore balance. It might feel a little bit difficult to make that equilibrium. It may feel like no matter what action that we take, that there is a winner and a loser within that there is someone that will gain and someone that will experience lack. But I do think that if we are conscious about it, we can create situations where that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. But we'll have to live into that answer. The other thing I would advise with Sun-Jupiter experiences, especially with a fallen sun, sometimes we can overcompensate for our insecurities by puffing ourselves up, right? I have noticed sometimes that when we have the sun in difficult positions, there can be a lack of confidence that is overcompensated with arrogance or with trying to make others less than. And when we have Jupiter making that square, anything that Jupiter touches, especially in a square, can blow it out of proportion. And we can make things bigger than they need to be. And when we have the sun making a square to Jupiter, sometimes it's our egos that get blown out of proportion. So that is another day to be careful about getting too haughty, getting too proud. The good news is that Jupiter is in the overcoming position. And oftentimes when Jupiter is in an overcoming square, if you look from the center, it's going to be on the right of center. So here is the center part of this. So this is the center. And Jupiter is on the right side if you're looking from the perspective of the center, okay? That is said to be in the overcoming position, like it is chasing the sun, right? So when you have a benefic planet, and especially one that is very dignified, Jupiter in Cancer. I think our better angels are going to prevail in that circumstance. The actions that we take to be able to restore balance and restore abundance without taking away from someone else, I think is going to be probably what is winning out in this situation, and that gives me hope. Okay, when we get to the 19th and the 18th and 19th, we're going to see Mars and Mercury going through a trine with the North Node. And this is setting up a conjunction between those two planets. So here we have this trine between those, and as they come together at 19 degrees of Scorpio. Now, when a planet is making a square to the nodes, that often can be a turning point, a crossroads that necessitates some choices that could be some difficult choices. We're moving away from decrease and towards increase, or away from decrease, or away from increase and towards decrease, etc. In this case, we have a flowing aspect between the moon's nodes of fate. Maybe we made some important choices the last time that those two planets were squaring the nodes, and now we might start to see the results of those actions. Now, when the two planets come together the day after, on the 20th, this is on a fixed star called Zubin Eshemali. And it is a fixed star in one of the claws of the scorpion, of the ancient claws, but also represents one of the scales. Okay, like the claws and the scales are sort of overlapped in the sky constellation-wise. It's pretty interesting. But Zubin el-Shemali is one of two fixed stars. Zubin el-Janubi is the other one, which talks about fairness, balance, of justice. And Zubin el-Janubi is one where it's called insufficient price. That's the one where we're not really experiencing the right payment for our work. We're getting a harsh judgment. Now, at 19 degrees of Scorpio, though, that other one, el-Janubi, is about 15 degrees of Scorpio. Here at 19 degrees of Scorpio, Zubin el-Shemali is the more positive of those two fixed stars. And it represents a favorable verdict, sufficient price, getting what we have earned in the situation. So this one is more associated with mercy, with a favorable verdict, a merciful verdict. Now, we've had these two prominent figures in the news, in the communication spheres, and one of them, Mr. Kimmel on ABC, has, I believe, the sun very close to this Mercury-Mars conjunction. So I'd be very curious to see how this continuing narrative continues to unfold into October, potentially with some sort of favorable verdict, maybe in his favor, because he has the sun around this degree, I guess you could say. So keep your eyes peeled for that. In your own life, think about what could be a potentially favorable verdict that could come through letting go of something, through like communicating your desire to make a severing from a situation where you were merged with something and it might not have been healthy. Okay. So think about this decan as, number one, revisiting an emotional issue in a nostalgic way. The Six of Cups, think about that. That's the Six of Cups decan. Think about how you can communicate a peaceful severing with Mars and Mercury coming together in a way that will help liberate you from an enmeshed and entangled situation that might not be bringing you vitality anymore. That's the beauty and grace that comes from a Mercury-Mars conjunction in this decan. And it will lead to a favorable outcome, a favorable verdict. So coming together, revisiting an issue, but not permanently, to be able to identify where you are having these, Austin calls this mutual distillation in 36 phases, right? Where we're exchanging on a very deep level. Sometimes we're exchanging blessings, sometimes we're exchanging poisons. And to be able to remove some of that can be very powerful. Now, as we move forward with this, Mercury on the 21st is going to be moving into its retrograde shadow here on the 21st. So this is the point that Mercury will retrograde back to when it goes through its retrograde cycle in November. So something that was given or something that was taken away may be returned. Okay. Wouldn't be surprised if our friend on ABC returns. This is going to be returning to the exact degree of his natal sun. And I know I'm mentioning him a lot, but he is a vehicle right now for some very, very important zeitgeist discussions. And being able to see that chart triggered, I will say also too, the Mercury-Saturn conjunction was activated in his chart as well. I'll just show you this real quick. Like this is, let's see. I wonder if I have it here. One moment. Yeah, Scorpio Sun, Mars in Capricorn, and you can see he had Saturn, Uranus right on the degree of the Mercury-Saturn opposition. So a shocking release, right? But you could see here that, let's put him on the inside. You could see here that his sun at 20 degrees of Scorpio is the exact degree that Mercury is going to be retrograding back to. Okay, so a revisiting of something for him, his identity, his work, etc. This is an untimed chart, so don't use the houses here. But we haven't seen the last of this person in the news. But anyway, let's move forward. It's always, you know, celebrities give us an insight into some things because they're living out. They become symbols for something. They become symbols for greater challenges that we're working through as a collective, as a shared species. And those figures are really prominent right now in the zeitgeist. So Mercury moving back into its shadow. Mercury is going to retrograde in Sagittarius. I believe this is going to be coming up in November. So take note of what you might be experiencing communication-wise starting on the 21st, because you may have to revisit that, especially in the Scorpio area of your chart. The other thing that is happening on that day is the new moon, okay? The new moon in Libra 3. So here's the new moon in Libra 3, 28 degrees of Libra, co-present with Venus, its host, at 9 degrees of Libra. So all the themes that we talked about with restoring balance, restoring equilibrium, maintenance mode, being able to calm your inner self first to be able to bring peace to your external environment, all of those things are seeds that are going to be planted at this new moon. The Venus portion of it is important because Venus is on a fixed star called Diadem. And Diadem is a crown of hair, basically, from the constellation Coma Berenices, or Queen Berenices, who was a queen married to a king that had gone to war in an ancient civilization. And she made a sacrifice of her hair, which was a symbol of prominence. It was a symbol of beauty. And she made that sacrifice to Aphrodite for the safe return of her husband from war. So oftentimes this fixed star talks about a sacrifice that we need to make for our family or for our community. And sometimes it is something that might lower us in status temporarily, but then ultimately will lead to a positive outcome. So this new moon could be involving a sacrifice for the family, but in an effort to restore peace, to restore equilibrium, to restore balance. We'll talk about that more in a future live stream. On the 22nd, we see Neptune retrograding back into, oops, oh, we lost it. So let's go forward here all the way back to the 22nd. So on the 22nd of October, a couple things are happening. Before the sun moves into Scorpio, Neptune retrogrades into Pisces. So you can see this here. So it is going to be starting to be part of our grand trine with Mars, Mercury, Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter, our grand water trine. So this is adding even more watery, like the ultimate water planet, Neptune, right? The god of Poseidon, the god of the ocean, to the equation. So here we may be starting to glamorize something different. You know, we were glamorizing machismo with Aries. We were glamorizing conflict. We were glamorizing independence. And that we sometimes have fallen under delusions of what that might mean. We're falling under certain leaders are falling under the glamour of manifest destiny, of annexing countries, which is associated with the Two of Wands, the first decan of Aries, where we see the figure that was related to Alexander the Great pondering which new area he wants to colonize and become his new dominion. So we may see a reduction in that type of rhetoric, and we are starting to revisit a decan of Pisces that is associated with extremes of emotion, all right, of, you know, Pandora unleashing all the ills onto society, but how do we maintain our hope in the face of those things? So a little bit of a shift in our collective projections, I guess you could say, and having it come into alignment with Neptune. So dissolving of structures, dissolving ocean issues, right? With Saturn moving back into Pisces and Neptune as well. We could see some need for becoming responsible for our waterways, for the water wars, you know, the way that we utilize that resource in particular. Now the sun is going to be moving into Scorpio that day as well. So let's talk a little bit about the sun in Scorpio 1. So to do so, we will take this away for a minute and we will add this. Here we go. So there is the Scorpio 1 decan flashcard. It is one of the most martial decans in all of the zodiac. It is in the house of Mars. Scorpio is hosted by Mars. It is the steward of Scorpio. The face ruler in both the descending Chaldean order and in the triplicity system utilized in some Eastern astrological traditions are both Mars. We see a very martial tarot card with the 5 of Cups with 3 spilled cups and a figure that is mourning that loss while 2 cups are still standing behind. And Book T calls this a loss in pleasure. Book of Thoth, the Lord of Disappointment. Austin Coppock calls it a jawbone due to the association with hungers that we have difficulty satiating in this decan. We have a daimon or spirit called the nymphi, which were objects of desire, but also objects of desire that led to some difficult outcomes. The nymphi were deities that were chased by Orion that ultimately led to his demise. He desired these nymphs and ultimately was killed by the scorpion because of his pursuit. There was also associations with the nymphi and the nymphs with grief and the Pleiades. So the sisters in the Pleiades were associated with the nymphi, and one of them passed and there was grieving for their lost sibling. So we start to identify in Scorpio 1 that which we need to release. We may be ritualizing our grief. We may be coming to terms with something that we are addicted to or something that we desire that we might not be able to receive. Now, all of these planets are going to start squaring Pluto. We've talked about that a little bit. So a lot of what we might not be able to receive may be due to feeling othered in society, of the corruption of sending off a group of people into exile, as we are seeing happening in various countries around the world, America included. The othering of immigrants, etc., the othering of people of color, the othering of people of different sexual orientations or gender identities. So these themes start coming up when we have planets in the first decan of Aquarius. And when we have these Scorpio planets squaring, we could feel that grief really acutely of feeling that exile, of feeling othered, of feeling like we're on the outside in the fringe of society and not necessarily being appreciated or respected for who and or what we are or what we believe. So it's one stage of a process. Mars, being a planet that severs and separates, in Aries, just for contrast, is severing one point of consciousness from the collective, Pisces, okay, through the sign of Aries, through the time period of Aries, to differentiate from that collective and then infuse into a body in Taurus, a union of spirit and body, of seed and field, right? In Scorpio, we're returning that stuff to the earth. In the northern hemisphere, it's a time of letting go. It's a time of compost. It is saying this body is spent. And if we keep trying to grow something within this spent, cold, decaying soil, it's not going to be nutritious. We're not going to eat something that comes off of the vine in late November that is full of mold and worms. It won't bring us the nutrition that we want. It'll make us sick. So we take that tomato, whatever it is, and we put it in the compost pile. We give it willingly to that compost and those forces of decay. Because what it will do is it will break down into the nutrition that will be needed in the next cycle of spring, the next cycle of growth. But instead of avoiding the grief associated with that, we need to acknowledge it. We need to feel it. Instead of just being like, well, this is just to get us to the next cycle, which is true. We need to acknowledge every part of the cycle and be in the moment. And if we were to do that in Western civilization, we would probably be avoiding some of the greatest challenges of our time due to never acknowledging the need for release, the need for the ground to lay fallow, the need to return things to the earth and to rest. And this is a powerful time for coming to terms with that from an outside perspective, from the zeitgeist that we live in places like America, in places like Europe, etc. Anything that is associated with late stage capitalism or with Western civilization. So, checking in here. Rachel says, my lot of spirit is in Scorpio 1. I listened to a webinar this week on herbs for grieving, and it profoundly moved and inspired me. Ooh, Rachel, I would love to send me a link or put it in the chat. I would love to learn more about that. Anytime we can come to terms with things that we need to release and smooth that process out or engage with the process willingly and maybe even, dare I say, I don't know if joyfully is the right word, but maybe reverently, with reverence. That I think can be extremely powerful and lead to much better outcomes in our life and as a society. All right, so let's start moving into these grand water trines. So if I bring it's our last decan between the 22nd and November the 1st. And here we have the first grand water trine, which is mercurial. So now we see Mercury making a trine. Let's just go forward. This is going to be perfecting during the time period between the 23rd and the 25th. Let's make it purple. That feels very grand water trine. So you could see here, we've got this huge stack up, this huge stellium in Scorpio, and really specifically Scorpio 3. So if we talk about Scorpio 3 in a little bit more depth, we have a glamorization of a form that needs to be returned. It's a Venus-ruled decan. So my favorite metaphor with this is Norman Bates, where he loses his mother, but he does increasingly horrible things to keep her, the illusion or delusion of her being alive. Like he's literally got her in the basement. He's doing all these horrible things in service of her, I don't know, not even just her memory, his delusion of her. And we talk about the need to let go of those things in this decan. So we've got Mars, Mercury, and the moon over this period of time activating all of that and saying, let's be careful of glamorizing a form that has already outlived its usefulness. There may be some painful experiences in letting go, but it becomes more painful when we hang on and cease to deal with the need to let go of something. I've had a lot of clients with this Decan activated that really struggled with addiction. But in 9 times out of 10, the cases that I've seen, these folks have a transformation and a rebirth, a death and rebirth that needs to happen. I would say the addiction part comes from hanging on too tightly to something that isn't bringing you joy, health, or vitality. Sometimes wanting to escape a painful parting or a painful experience that you need to let go of, rather than doing the hard work of actually returning that form to the earth. Sometimes it's not even hard work. Sometimes it's harder work hanging on to something that we need to let go of. But then being reborn and liberated through finally letting that form go. So with the moon, Mercury, and Mars hanging out in Scorpio 3, it's going to be making a trine to Saturn and Neptune in the 3rd decan of Pisces, a reality check about what we sacrifice for others, how we are either playing the role of the martyr or playing the role of the savior, and how we view ourselves within that narrative. And the trine with Jupiter in the decan associated with the 4 of Cups. So we've got 7 of Cups, Mars, Mercury, Moon, Scorpio. We've got 10 of Cups, Saturn and Neptune. And then we have the 4 of Cups associated with Jupiter. So we see a story playing out. We have to be careful not to over-glamorize a form that is already passing on. We need to be realistic about what we are sacrificing to do so. And then we are getting Jupiter helping us to understand how to create abundance without necessarily taking away from someone else. Okay? So in this case, we may be able to let go of an old form without even feeling really diminished by it because of Jupiter's trine. We might be able to let go, and that feels so good and liberating because we're not holding on to something that is blocking our future manifestations. And I think that can be a really powerful moment here. So this is the grand water trine with Mercury between the 23rd and the 25th, which will then be followed by a grand water trine of Mars, okay, between the 28th and the 29th. So we start with asking questions. Mercury, what needs to be let go of? Are we over glamorizing something that has outlived its efficacy? Can we get realistic about it? Can we do it? Can we let go of it in a way that is not necessarily diminishing ourselves or others in the process? And then we take action on it. This is when Mars takes action and says, it's time to go. It's time to sever. It's time to separate. We're going to try to make the parting as painless as possible, right? That's what this series of water trines says to me. Ani is here. What's up, Ani? Catching the replay later. Just hoping all is well. Nice to see you, Ani. Hope you're doing well. Ani, we're having another Decan Walk open house. If you want to stop in, we're doing that on the 29th, which is a Monday. Hope you can make it. During this second grand water trine, we will also be seeing a first quarter moon. So here is the moon going to be hanging out. Let's move forward because this is a few days later. So I've already got the trine here. Let's see if we can keep it. I wonder if it'll let me keep it. Yeah. Nope. Oh well. Can't hang on to things too long. If we get to the 28th, here we see the first quarter moon, right? Mercury will have moved into, there's the sun and the moon, and the moon's going to activate Pluto that day also. So expect something very collective, highlighting the need for transformation in people that have been cast into exile, okay? And then that is bringing out the grand water trine with Mars, Saturn, and Jupiter here. See that? So this is a time where we're going to be taking action, but we're dealing with that square between Scorpio 1, grieving a loss, and maybe grieving seeing people being othered in society or cast into exile through potentially overt misuses of power. Whenever we have Sun-Pluto difficult aspects, that can lead to an overreach with leadership, because the sun is casting a light on a corrupt motive or something that's been repressed and cast into darkness, right? Pluto has driven something underground for so long, and when the sun shines its rays on it, it's making us aware of something or corruption in the system. In this case, probably the way that immigrants are being treated, probably the way that people who are not within the centralized, socially acceptable, I don't know if that's the right word, acceptable by who, like it's what the centralized power deems as acceptable, and the corruption of how those people are being treated. And when the sun shines its light from a square, there's probably something that shows us that corruption in a difficult and martial way, in a way that is a little bit painful. So we may need to sever and separate because of our discomfort that we see in this regard here. So that is our quarter moon. Again, brings us to the grand water trine from the 28th to the 29th. And also, we start seeing Mercury moving into an interesting place. Ani says, I watched the last Deccan open house. Sounds awesome. I want to join, but the problem is I'm going to be living on the road and super busy. I don't think I'll be able to keep up. Criminalizing homelessness is a good example. Perfect example, Ani. Well, I hope that, thank you for watching the Decan Walk, open house. Ani, I won't twist your arm if it's not right for you, but if there's some that you miss, not a huge deal. There's recordings that you can catch up with as well. It'd be great to have you in the group, but I know that sometimes it's not always going to work out in the cycle. Maybe sometime it will in the future if it doesn't this time around. But yes, criminalizing homelessness, super interesting. We've had somebody in the collective talking about involuntary injections for homeless people, and this is the kind of wild stuff that has been thrown around by people. And yeah, there could be rhetoric like that coming out again, where leadership proposes something that is very difficult or corrupt for dealing with a problem of people that have been othered in society. That's a great example, Ani, of dealing with whatever the challenge of homelessness is. And in that case, instead of getting them the help that they need and the services that they need, they're just like, well, let's just eliminate them, which is horrific. It's barbaric. So I think that we may see something like that in the collective coming up into our consciousness. Now, when Mercury moves into Sagittarius, it will immediately oppose Uranus. Okay. So on the 29th, Mercury is going to move out of Scorpio, out of the grand water trine with Saturn, Neptune, and Jupiter, and Mars being co-present. And it's going to move into its exile. Now, the good news is that its host, Jupiter, is in a good spot, but it isn't able to witness its host, which is semi-problematic. The challenging news is that it's going to make an immediate opposition to Uranus. Mercury in the first decan of Sagittarius actually has some decanic dignity. It has some dignity that allows you to move swiftly and communicate ideas swiftly and to be able to get people on board with your vision through your enthusiasm. The challenges of it are that we might be firing off information, firing off communications that are more based on our dogmatic belief system rather than through getting multiple perspectives and asking questions. This is the type of Mercury that just fires off a sermon or a soapbox sermon rather than a discussion. And when we have Mercury opposing Uranus, those communications can be very fraught with shock. They can be fraught with aspiring towards a completely unrealistic, hubristic vision. Talked a lot about that with Uranus and Gemini live stream. You can go back and find that. But hubris is associated with Uranus quite significantly because we're aspiring to be godlike, or Uranus is aspiring to be godlike through the stealing of fire, if we equate Uranus with Prometheus. But that can get away from us very quickly. It's like an uncontrollable force. And we may have some communications that will very easily get out of control if we are not being aware of what we're doing and conscious of what we're doing when Mercury moves into Sagittarius and into its opposition. We may be very passionately communicating. The proverbial gloves will be off. It's not going to be communicating in secret. It's going to be very loud, out front, very passionate. And in the current circumstances, friends, it is potentially a little bit dangerous to have that type of unrestrained, passionate communication style. And I don't necessarily say that to add to anybody's censorship or muzzling or etc. I'm saying that more as a self-preservation type of experience. I think there's going to be a lot of ways to push back on oppressive forces. I think it's the way it needs to be done needs to be cagey. When you have people that are in control of massive amounts of power and you are not necessarily in the driver's seat with that, you have to be cagey about how you push back on that power. We suggested earlier today, rather than meeting state-sponsored violence with violence of the masses, you meet that type of thing, that type of censorship, that type of oppression with voting with your dollar, with calling up television stations that support this type of state-sponsored censorship. And you'd say that I'm not going to spend my money on the products that are supporting your channels. That's a way to like set a healthy boundary and speak the language and truth to power without perpetuating a cycle of violence. So this might be another opportunity to do something of that nature, where you're having to be strategic about how you push back. And it's a good warning, because the influence that we're going to be feeling is like shouting from the rooftops, very passionately, maybe very angrily, and doing it in a way that is just like a blurting out of the most blunt type of communication ever. Like that's one of the challenges of Mercury in Sagittarius, is people with that placement sometimes are like, well, I'm just telling the truth. And you may be telling the truth, but sometimes that truth can hurt people, right? And if your truth, and let's be real, a lot of people's truth is pretty relative. If your truth ends up being like an arrow that hurts people, is it really achieving what you set out to achieve? And that's something that we have to think about and ask ourselves when we are doing that. So this is going to be a really volatile communication aspect that is going to be making us feel fired up and wanting to communicate very passionately, but very subjectively potentially, and very bluntly. And it could very easily get out of control. And knowing that when we're going into it can, I think, help us to communicate in a way that will be more effective to actually achieve what we are trying to achieve. Javier says, I'm back. Hope everything is well. Just wanted to mention my daughter made up with these so-called haters. Oh, good. I'm glad. Maybe they met it with some love. Like maybe they found an equilibrium. Maybe they saw things from each other's perspectives. That would be really cool. I love that. If you can't bear your haters, join them. Well, maybe. But I think in this case, when we are fighting against authoritarianism and oligarchy, we don't necessarily have to join them. I think we just have to resist in a way that doesn't perpetuate the violence or fall into the trap of justifying their violence expansion based on our actions, if that makes sense. It's never justified, but as you can see, people will take any action and try to twist it into something that will benefit their point of view. And we've seen that a lot with the gaslighting that's been happening the last few weeks. Here says, unfortunately, oh, so she's 6. Okay, I thought she was a teenager, but fortunately, I cannot tell a 6-year-old that without being taken literally. So your 6-year-old is dealing with haters? What are they arguing about? whose lunch is what, you know, the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, or I don't know. 6-year-olds can have all sorts of beef, and sometimes it can go difficult, pretty sideways, pretty difficult, really quickly. Ani says, Mercury in Sagittarius is unfiltered, nonstop chatter, running the mic and telling the truth with no gauge of consequences, right? And that can get out of control really quickly with an opposition to Uranus. Javier says, it was cute, made her a heart. Kids show us it can be peaceful. Yeah. And some kids sometimes will forget a beef really quickly. Like they'll have some kind of beef, and then the next moment they'll be best friends. So maybe we could take a cue from that, not hold on to grudges too long. All right. Yeah, it does. These kids are growing up quickly. 6-year-old beef. Okay, a couple more things, and then we will wrap for the day. Thank you so much for being here with me today. Do me a huge favor, like the video if you can, subscribe to the channel. Go find me over at spencermichaud.com. Sign up for the Decan Walk open house. Sign up for the Decan Walk. Just join us. If you need a payment plan, reach out. I'm happy to work with you. So, right after Mercury moves into Sagittarius and opposes Uranus, it will sextile Pluto. This is the last aspect of the month. So it's going to go into the sextile with Pluto in Aquarius, and it is going to go out of bounds. So not only is Mercury going to be opposing Uranus by whole sign and in a very passionate place, it's going to sextile Pluto, where we're going to be probably talking very passionately about all the issues we've been talking about people cast into exile and the corruption associated with that. But now Mercury is going to be out of bounds. So we might be communicating in ways that we would never entertain while Mercury was in a place where it would be communicating in a socially acceptable way. So we might see people speaking up and speaking out, and maybe that can lead to some positive outcomes. But we might also be creating conflicts by the way that we're speaking up and speaking out that could complicate our lives as well. So there's a balance point between those two experiences. We may also have ideas that are far outside the box. We might be having thoughts that are not necessarily of the norm. And sometimes that's a good thing, because that can help us to see things from a perspective that we never would have thought about when Mercury was in its normal conditions. So that's really what we're going to see leading up to our Halloween experience, is a Mercury out of bounds opposite Uranus. Just be careful if you do have little ones. Like there could be people that are with Mercury out of bounds in Sagittarius opposite Uranus, people driving too fast. People just, there's speed associated with Mercury in the first decan of Sagittarius. So people could be rushing and acting and communicating rashly, but that can also lead to people driving quickly. So just be extra careful if you're going out on that night. Slow down. I will never fault anybody for slowing down in this channel. But take it from a Taurus moon that sometimes that will lead to better outcomes. Just be careful you don't get yourself in a situation where it's moving too quickly. Now, when we get into November, here's just a little preview of November. We've got Mercury and Jupiter stationing retrograde. So Mercury is going to be stationing retrograde in Sagittarius. Jupiter is stationing retrograde in Cancer. Saturn is going to be stationing direct in Pisces in November. And then Mercury, by the end of the month, will be stationing direct in Scorpio at 20 degrees of Scorpio, right where we mentioned the retrograde shadow happening. Uranus will also retrograde out of Gemini and back in Taurus to revisit some Taurus stuff. And then we'll have a Mercury retrograde inferior Cazimi, okay? Mercury in the heart of the sun, a renewal, a beginning of a new Mercury cycle in the final degrees of Scorpio at a new moon in Scorpio. So powerful, powerful stuff. You're going to want to join me for the Astrology of November in about a month, and we'll break it all down for you then. I do have a hexagram for you and an animal to guide us through, and they both are kind of speaking some interesting things. So here we have the hexagram number 11, and it is translating to peace, a pretty good symbol for Libra season, trying to restore some peace. And let's take some quotes from Jack Balkin. This translates to peace, harmony, where we have two, the yang hexagram and the yin hexagram are equally balanced in this particular hexagram. Harmony, smoothly flowing, prosperity, union of high and low, harmonious interactions, things going well. This hexagram represents a time of great prosperity and concord. Heaven and earth operate together happily and effortlessly. The high act in harmony with the low, the strong with the weak, and the great with the small. Progressive forces make strides, worthy elements advance without obstacles, and people of talent, ability, and wisdom obtain the respect due to them, and others work with them freely and happily without envy or rancor. Those who join in are honored and respected in turn for their contributions. Peace descends on the world, and everything flows smoothly and easily. I like that. So that's good right away. Let's talk about the changing lines, because there could be some caveats with that. The second changing line says, it's 9 in the second place. The second place is changing energy. Embrace the uncouth and the common. Ford the stream. Do not abandon those far away. Then cliques dissolve. One obtains honor by walking the central path. Okay, so we've talked about people in exile. We've talked about bridging communication gaps. So this says, especially when things are going well, you must cultivate worthy habits to keep things running smoothly. First, do not become arrogant or treat people with condescension. Just because you are prospering does not make you better than everyone else. Be tolerant and open-minded. Now is the time to undertake important and difficult tasks. Everyone, no matter how lowly or ordinary, may have something valuable to contribute. Try to see the good in people, and you encourage them to grow and live up to your positive expectations. Second, try to take the longer view of things. Do not neglect important questions, even if they seem distant from the current concerns. Small problems turn into large ones because we are too busy to take care of them early on. Third, avoid playing favorites and do not fall prey to factionalism. Really important in these times of fractured belief systems. Do not engage in divisive practices that corrode trust and cooperation. Many a prosperous time has been ruined because people became greedy or clannish. Work for the common good rather than for a selfish or special interest. Finally, practice moderation and avoid going to extremes. Avoid self-indulgence. If you can follow these principles in your life, you can prolong the good times and help ward off the onset of bad ones. And there's one more changing line here. It says, there is no plane without a slope. There is no going forth without a return. One who perseveres in times of hardship is without blame. Do not be worried about this truth. Enjoy the blessings you possess. Jack goes on to say, the basic lesson of the Book of Changes is that everything changes. Good times turn to bad, and bad times eventually improve. Even during the most peaceful and prosperous conditions, difficulties, decay, and evil are merely held in check and are never completely eliminated. But one should not dwell on this obsessively. Negative thinking keeps you from enjoying the present. It may actually contribute to the hastening of decay, for if you think things will go wrong, they probably will. Rather, the right attitude is to be realistic and to accept the laws of change. First, because the good times will not last forever, you should not waste them, but make the most of them. Learn to live in the here and now. Take advantage of opportunities to grow while resources are available to you. Second, recognize that you cannot rely on external circumstances or the approval of others to make you happy, for these things inevitably fluctuate over time. Remember, I've talked about a story with that of trying to find peace internally, even though my external environment is changing. If you're overly dependent on external things, you will suffer greatly when fortunes change. The best way to deal with change is to develop your own inner resources. Strength of character and independence of spirit will help you enjoy the good times and persevere through the bad times. Inner resolve and faith in your own abilities bring you good fortune in the long run, no matter what happens in the short run. Now, this is changing to the hexagram number 24, which is translated to return, renewal, turning back, repentance, reform, restoration, renovation, rejuvenation, a turning point. Fu represents the beginning of a new cycle of growth. That is the name for this hexagram number 24. The text offers a metaphor of 7 days as the length that a cycle must take before it renews itself. If one begins with yang energy and starts from bottom to top, and replaces each line with its opposite. In 6 transformations, the yin line will have fully displaced the yang lines. The 7th transformation then begins a new sequence, and a yang line moving up from the bottom. It goes on to say, you have reached a turning point and the beginning of a new cycle. The law of change is in operation, and after a period of decline, confusion, and stagnation, there are new possibilities for renewal, clarity, and improvement. The old order is passing away and a new one is dawning. As things begin to change imperceptibly in your favor, new alliances and relationships can form, and old ones that had grown stale and frayed can become renewed and strengthened. Hence the text says, friends come. Nevertheless, you should not expect that everything will get better overnight. Rather, this hexagram describes the moment at which the tide begins to shift in your favor. The days start to become longer at the winter solstice, but spring is still many months off. For this reason, it would not be wise to try to force matters. Things are still in their earliest stages, and it would be best to let them develop naturally in their own time. So a return maybe of some peace, a return of some order, but we have to be patient with the process. Corruption didn't happen overnight, and the restoration of sanity isn't going to happen overnight either. All right, let's check in with the chat before we do the animal here. Ani says, I love this reading. It's a great reading. It's positive. It gives us some hope, right? Yeah, very cool hexagram, Javier says. Ani says, I figured out how to join the Decan Walk. I've been waiting to join for 2 years. The I-Ching Tarot, Tao Tarot to share, and I have the books already. Might not be able to make every class, but I should be able to keep up with the videos and my tarot cards. That would be awesome, Ani. Well, if you can make the open house, that'll help you get even more information. But if you want to just reach out and figure out a way to sign up, I would be more than happy to help facilitate that process. Javier says, that tarot sounds dope. I'm looking for a new deck. Nice. Well, we'll be talking about tarot and Decan Walk for sure. All right, friends. The animal that I have for you is a beautiful one. It's a seahorse, right? What an amazing animal for a series of grand water trines, the seahorse. So look at this little beautiful little seahorse here. So seahorse, I'm going to read you a little bit from Animal Frequency by Melissa Alvarez. This was actually also my animal of the day. I pulled the seahorse today for today and for the month, which is kind of interesting synchronicity. Seahorse symbolizes placidity, gentle movements, slowing down and enjoying life. It is the power of your subconscious, your higher self. It means that you have a unique outlook, which may often be different from those around you. Seahorse has exceptional eyesight, with each eye functioning independently. One can look forward and one backward at the same time, which means that you often see what's happening around you at many different levels. People may tell you one thing, but you can see deeper into the heart of the matter. Seahorses mate for life and meet each other. Meet each morning to do a pairing dance, which includes changing colors. This means that you're compatible and giving in relationships. Listen closely when Seahorse appears. It can be hard to hear, as if it's whispering to you in a soft voice from a great distance, but its words will be filled with important messages that help you grow in your personal life or in spirit. Seahorse means to focus and not take anything in your life for granted. It means to let go of anger, fears, and negative emotions. Be present. Live in the moment. Share joy with those around you. It means someone around you may need your protection or for you to stand up for them in the near future. It is a reminder never to give up. Keep going on your goals with persistence, patience, and with gentle forward movement to reap the biggest rewards. Seahorse means to be happy with yourself. It urges you to stop, evaluate, and consider your inner goodness and your accomplishments. Stop being so hard on yourself. You're a beautiful being filled with light and ambience. You don't have to change anything at this point. Just be yourself and find happiness and joy and contentment within. There will be time for change later, but for right now, just enjoy being you. This animal assists you when you need to bring peacefulness and gentleness back into your nature. Sometimes we can get so involved in the stresses of life in this hectic world that we become frustrated, stressed, and irritated at everything and everyone. Seahorse is a reminder to let go of all those negative traits and embrace the gentleness within you. Everyone has the ability to be gentle, peaceful, and kind. But you have to choose to embrace those qualities and to share them with others. When you need to let down your guard in order to become closer to someone or in your work environment, Seahorse can help you do this without feeling vulnerable. If you're feeling as though you're bobbling around in life without focus or any true plan for your future, Seahorse can help you anchor yourself and evaluate the path you should take. It can also help you to see the barriers you've created that aren't needed and can help you break them down and move them out of your way. I love that. That's an awesome reading from the Seahorse. It just talks about gentleness, about accepting ourselves, seeing some of the beauty in life, even though we're inundated with all sorts of gaslighting that wants to make us afraid. Sometimes we just need to shut down the phone, the internet, and go outside, look at a beautiful sunset, look at the wind blowing through the trees, look at some flowers that we have around us, take a nice walk with someone we care about, or say hi to a neighbor, or get to meet someone new. There's all sorts of ways that we can embrace the beauty in the world while still preparing ourselves to deal with some of the challenges. So a wonderful, wonderful message from the Seahorse today. That, my friends, is what I have for you. Thank you so much. Javier says, I just got a bunch of downloads. I love it. I love it. Maybe you got some downloads from the universe, right? Do me a favor. Before you go, please like the video, subscribe to the channel. Go find me over at spencermichaud.com. Again, we have our Decan Walk that starts on Monday, October the 6th. We have a free open house on Monday, September the 29th at 2 p.m. Eastern Time. You can sign up for that with the link at my website or the link in the chat here. Also, our guided group study, The Return of the King, starts Monday, this Monday, September the 22nd. As I'm recording this, we're going to be celebrating Frodo and Bilbo's birthday. If you want to come join us for the last leg of the journey in the Lord of the Rings and prepare for the Silmarillion, would love to have you on board. And then finally, go find me over on social media at Spencer Michaud. The various channels of social media will try to spread some good news and good word out into the world. That's what I've got for you today, friends. Thank you for hanging out. Have a wonderful October. Hang in there. Try to find some peace. Try to float along with the currents of life like the seahorse. Go with the flow. Come into alignment with the Tao in your life, and we'll get through this together. We'll get through this together by being kind to one another, and most of all, being kind to ourselves. Try not to beat yourself up too much in these challenging times, and find a little bit of joy out in the world. So take care, friends, and I will see you the next time. Thank you, friends. Thank you, Javiera. Thank you, everyone who stopped by today. Have a good one, and we'll see you the next time. Peace.